Hey, deserving listeners, this is Chapter 7 in our deep dive on the psychology of Elon Musk. Let's get into it, Berto. What do you say?
Let's do it.
This is the Psychology in Seattle podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Kirk Honda. I'm a therapist and a professor. Who are you, Berto?
My name is Humberto Castañeda, and I document narwhals in the wild.
So I was telling you off air that I'm really gratified with the opportunity to do this deep dive for a number of reasons. Yeah. You know, I've known about Elon Musk, and I've passively read some of the news and heard people talking about him, but I never really had a understanding of what was going on. I would hear what people were saying, and it's satisfying to have the time to go through, because the way that I do this, it's kind of like journalism in a sense, where I'm gathering information, I'm gathering secondhand information, but there's a lot of different people saying different things about the same thing. And so I have to kind of piece together what I believe to be the objective truth, and there's also a level of depth that I'll go through. It's also what attracted me to psychology to begin with, which is the practice or the activity of trying to figure something out, like a puzzle. I remember thinking that when I decided to become a therapist, that because it sort of came out of nowhere when I was 24 years old. It's like suddenly it just occurred to me, what if I was a therapist? And it made all the sense in the world. And I thought, well, why have I never thought about this before? But I was pulling on all these themes in my life that explained why it made so much sense for me to be a therapist. One of which was I've always just been fascinated with puzzles, and not physical puzzles. Like but just trying to figure something out. Like, why did that happen? Why do people do that? Why do I do what I do?
Yeah.
How do people come together?
Behavioral puzzles.
Yeah. What's going on? Yeah. What makes people tick? So to go through this, it's been gratifying in that way because there's so much data out there. And after going over all this and also walking through it with you and getting your input, I feel like I'm putting together the puzzle, and I don't know, it just feels, and it also, I think what this story, because it's not just Elon Musk. I think the story of Elon Musk involves a lot of other stories. It involves the story of online media, social media. It involves the story of capitalism and of the future and of venture capitalism and business and society and gender and politics and people feeling like they're being left behind, or people feeling like they're misunderstood and they gravitate to someone like Elon Musk. I don't know. It has to do with black and white thinking and lacking nuance and echo chambers. And also just, it's a revisiting of how complicated humans are and how there are people contain multitudes. You can have someone who does things that are deplorable, right, racist, anti-Semitic, which we'll get into that later, and also potentially be a good person who does good things and has good intentions. How do those things exist? We don't typically narrativize people in the world like this. We don't say, well, someone is a racist and they're anti-Semitic, but they're also a good person and they do a lot of good things. And I appreciate the good things that they do, and I greatly condemn them for the bad things that they do and think. People don't usually talk that way. We usually say, you're either one or the other. And if you're one, then it erases the other. You know what I mean? So this involves so much, and so much of what the story of Elon, particularly once we get to contemporary times, has to do with critical questions and things that we need to be thinking about moving forward. Not just about Elon Musk, but about all of us, about the media landscape, about politics, about how we're going to get along, how we're going to move forward, what online social media is used for, how it changes things. Like, it makes me feel like I'm part of the contemporary online discussion, because I feel like by understanding Musk in a lot of ways, you understand the online discourse. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, basically it's because it's so tied both by his own behavior on online media, but there are a lot of pockets of subculture that are represented through his story. I also feel there's a sense in which his narrative of the future is important to discuss because it is very relevant. In spite of his recent behavior over the last N number of years, the narrative of, hey, what are we going to do about sustainability and the planet and the future? And I think that's an important conversation.
Right. So in the timeline, we are now at 2010. So around here, maybe 2009 is when Elon starts to tweet, speaking of. And I don't know if Twitter was just starting to get popular, but it was popular enough that he was starting to use it, and he immediately took to it.
Yeah, in 2009, it was already going strong.
Oh, it was?
I remember, because I was actually developing something using Twitter APIs at the time.
Okay. I mean, certainly Twitter wasn't what it would eventually become, right?
Yeah.
Okay, it was already going strong, but he immediately took to it. This is something I didn't know. I wouldn't have been surprised if someone said that Elon Musk didn't even tweet until 4 or 5 years ago or something, so that's interesting. He immediately gained a lot of followers, and he was already building a fan base, some would say a mini cult of some kind. They were flocking to him. So what was it about Elon Musk's initial Twitter behavior that might have made him a major player on Twitter in the beginning? Because, you were more in his world in the 4chan. I don't know if he's a 4chaner, but is appealing to that kind of culture.
Yeah.
What do you think about his tweets made him of interest at the time?
First of all, you mentioned 4chan. Absolutely the memes. Like, he would heavily borrow memes and apply them in his tweets. And that would appeal to that segment, that demographic. Like,
Yeah, like he literally recorded a song about Harambe or something.
Yeah. It was basically surprising that a stuffy tech, CEO or whatever is lowering himself down into the subculture and tweeting things and putting memes and then irreverent comments about things. It was refreshing or different, or like, what?
And really adolescent kind of stuff.
Like, you didn't see Bill Gates doing that.
Right.
You didn't even see Mark Zuckerberg doing that, right? Like,
investors were not happy about this online activity, as they still are not happy about it. I think it's interesting to think about that, because up until this point, you could argue that he would never do anything to jeopardize his businesses, right? Or his investors' interest in investing.
Yeah, up until that point, he had done many unethical, in my opinion, potentially illegal things, but not to the detriment of the business.
Right. So at this point, he's playing around with Twitter in a way that seems haphazard. It seems too revealing or too personal, too risky, too childish, right? It's starting to make his businesses, or at least his leadership, his decision-making skills, it starts to make it look like, well, is Tesla and SpaceX doomed because they're headed by this like child man who is posting Pepe memes? You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. Although there is something that's starting out as well, which is, I think he's starting to realize that if he gets enough of a following from that consortium, it can actually give him power. They IPO'd in 2010, I believe. And that was a big deal because, like, in 2009, they had taken a government loan. There was like $400 some million with interest and with very strict requirements and things like that. When they IPO'd, they were able to raise so much money. They were able to pay that back. But now he's got not only like the power of being the CEO, but if he can actually get people who are investing in his company and buying stock, that's going to give him a different kind of power. And then that manifests itself later as he starts trying to like wield that power.
Right. But 4chan neckbeards are not those investors.
Not yet, but they will become those investors.
Yeah. But at this point, so I would argue that it was mostly for his own emotional and social needs.
Yeah.
And those needs were so unmet. And he was so desperate to get those needs met that he made a rare choice to do something for himself against what his business interests were.
Yeah.
And I'll get more into that in a future chapter when we talk about all the Twitter stuff and the bullying that he went through. Also in 2010, he married Talulah Riley. Again, he's 14 years older. He's 39. She's 25. I don't know what that says. A lot of people would say that that's inherently exploitative and harmful. We just don't know. It's certainly interesting, given that most people who are 39 wouldn't marry a 25-year-old for a variety of reasons, namely that you would just feel like you don't really understand each other as well as you would to someone closer to your age, for both people, right? But we did a whole deep dive on age differences and relationships.
After that deep dive, that doesn't seem that crazy to me at all.
Yeah. We have a very simplistic, reductive, I would say, puritanical point of view when it comes to this sort of thing, where we just look at it and say, ew, gross. And it's like, she's a grown woman.
Yeah.
She can make her own. It's a red flag or a yellow flag of exploitation because of the power. I mean, just think about the power differential there, right? But a power differential alone does not mean exploitation is happening.
And honestly, like I would feel the same yellow flag about the power differential if he was in his 20s, but was a billionaire, and she's not. She's a 25-year-old.
Right,
struggling model.
That's what I mean by power differential.
Yeah.
It's mainly
not the age.
It's mainly economic, but also the age. Now, I'll say, is there a problem there? Maybe. I would speculate there are probably two main factors that might have resulted, or maybe three, in having this age difference. Is that one, I think, given his breakup with Justine, which we went over earlier, that I think he was terrified of being left again. Because it could be argued that he felt left, right? He felt abandoned. He felt broken up with. That he might want to find someone that he believes is more pliable. You know, there's a stereotype that as women get older, they get more particular, if you will, and they have more preferences, and that younger people are more relaxed and chill about things. I don't know if that's still a stereotype, but you could imagine someone thinking that, not just age difference, not just that of that generation or that age, but also just like she'll probably be more appreciative of me because she's just starting out in life and all the money I have and all the knowledge that I have. She might look up to me in a way that will feed my ego and might make me just feel more secure, maybe more needed, so that I can go to bed at night being more sure that she's not going to leave me, that kind of stuff. Another reason is the narcissistic reason that we've been over, that he might have this notion, and he might have picked it up from other rich dudes, that the preference or the cool thing or the thing that the guys talk about over cigars late at night is that, younger is better, because they're all used up when they're older or whatever.
I got a young model.
Right.
That's the key.
Right. So that's a possibility.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that's what happened, but we could imagine that being a factor. But another factor is that if he is autistic, you can have a delayed development in terms of your socializing. Not always. He says he has autism, and I think it's quite possible that experts would diagnose him with that if they had a chance. And maybe they have, I don't know. But if that is true, and there's no indication that he was helped in childhood with how to navigate that, right?
Yeah.
That you could experience socializing in such a way that you just give up. And it looks like that's what he did, right? So you don't learn anything about socializing. You don't learn how other people act and feel. You don't learn how to have that negotiation. You want to have that back and forth. You want to have that connection, but you have a rudimentary understanding of that. So you might actually feel more comfortable with younger people because
it might be more compatible emotionally or mentally.
Right. Let's take a break. We need to take a break now. What do you say?
Let's do it.
So moving forward, 2011, not much to say here. Well, there is a lot to say about 2011, but in terms of time, we just have to kind of move forward. 2012, again, he voted for Obama. Just another data point. I find that to be kind of interesting.
But it would have been honestly shocking at the time if one heard that he hadn't. Because at the time, I think all of us had this perspective of, oh yeah, he's the good guy. He's saving the planet. He's obviously not on the side of let's ignore climate change. And of course.
Yeah, exactly.
It would have been completely shocking.
Right. He, this year, divorced from Talulah Riley after 2 years, after being together, I think, for 4 years.
So in 2012, he makes a promise to investors saying that he'll never have to raise capital for Tesla again, which is it's a bold promise, because they've gone public. They should have plenty of investment. And then
this would appeal to investors because that would mean that their current percentage of ownership won't be reduced.
That's right. And that they're going to start, obviously that means they're going to be profitable and they're going to be able to make money and fund the future investments.
Okay.
So it's a pretty big, bold claim. Spoiler alert. Of course, he ended up having to raise a lot of capital. After
Okay.
that. Yeah.
So is that an indication of him knowingly lying or wishful thinking?
This one is something I would be on the fence about, because maybe it is wishful thinking. It's just that you can then say, but hold on. The two things you can't hold at the same time, in my opinion, is you can't say he's a genius visionary businessman who correctly predicted they wouldn't need to raise capital again and didn't, or He's a genius businessman, visionary who predicted they wouldn't raise capital and then proceeded to raise capital over and over and over for all the subsequent years. Both of those can't be true. But was he like, I'm going to lie and say, well, that one is a little more debatable. Maybe he really was delusional in thinking that he wouldn't need to. But you can't claim that he was like, had the master plan and stuck to it, right? One of those two things wasn't true.
Yeah.
In my opinion, it's probably like he was, because this pattern just then continues. He just says things because he wants to pump the stock up. And sometimes they're just 100% lies. This one was probably in the middle. It was like, I mean, maybe we'll need to, but the way I look, it's probably fine. So no, we won't need to.
Yeah. Later, there's data pointing in that general direction of him being hyper-focused on the stock price of Tesla.
Yeah.
Most notably when the lockdowns for COVID start to happen, which we'll get into later. But another angle to this is that, which we'll get into later, which I'll say a lot because there's a whole chapter on this, that I think he has impulsive desire for acceptance. Mm-hmm. I'm guessing that wouldn't be the only factor that would cause him to say, I'm never going to have any more investors. But I wouldn't be surprised if in the moment he felt a dip in acceptance from people around him. And I think because he's never had friends and there's no evidence that he has any sort of deep connection or attachment, which he desperately needs, that he sees just anybody as a potential source for validation and attachment and connection. And since he lives in the business world and he's hyper focused on that and is distracting himself from his personal life by business and eventually tweeting,
yeah,
I think he doesn't differentiate between the general public or just random Twitter person or an investor. Maybe he knows the investor kind of well,
yeah,
but not like, that investor goes home and hangs out with their friends and their family. Meanwhile, Elon thinks of this person as like an attachment figure in a sense.
Yeah.
And also
similar to the people on Twitter, random people on Twitter, that he interacts with, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So later we'll provide more data to demonstrate this, and I think it's a very compelling hypothesis as to why he would shoot himself in the foot so much. I don't think it was a major factor in this one, but that is good data. I didn't know that.
The other thing he said in 2012 was that he promised superchargers that would be free and solar powered. So
solar powered?
Yeah, free and solar powered. But so this, again, this is where you can't hold both of the following. You can't say, well, he was a delusional non-engineer, but he didn't mean, he meant well, right? And you can't say, oh, he's a genius engineer who understands all the nuances. Like those two, either he knew, like that's impossible and I'm just flat out lying to everyone, or he doesn't know and he's just making stuff up. I fall on some of these.
Or he's impulsive and trying.
Both, right.
Because was that a tweet?
I don't know if this was oh, yes, it was a tweet.
Right.
Yes, it was a tweet. Yes.
I think he's constantly on Twitter and on his phone, but I think it points in the direction of this, which I'll get into later, that the social need and maybe even just relationship needs, he gets through Twitter because when he tweets, he instantly gets at least interaction.
Yeah.
Right? He gets a conversation and often gets tremendous praise. And also he gets a back and forth. Like you text me something and then I'll joke back and then you joke back. It's gratifying.
Yeah.
If you have none of that in your personal life and have never had it, and you also don't trust that people close to you will work out in that way, and you might even be terrified of people close to you because of the abuse you went through and also possibly feeling very hurt about his divorce. Through a screen, it's much safer.
Yeah.
So it's possible that tweet about I'm going to have free solar powered superchargers, in the moment that was after, because I'm going to go through the Thailand kids thing.
Yeah.
If you just pull one tweet out, you're like, what?
Yeah.
But if you look at the progression, it's still what the fuck.
Yeah.
But it makes it so much more understandable when you see the back and forth. When you just see, because I would just see Elon's tweet. That's what I would get in the news or whatever.
Yeah.
But when you look at the conversation, conversation is in is a
that
quote.
He's choosing to dive into with all these people. Yeah.
With just the general public on Twitter, it makes much more sense that you could see him emotionally going like, but I can do this, you know, like, okay, fine, I'll do it. And it's approval.
Right.
It's not, I'm going to wake up in the morning and like trick people to invest. It's arguably a bad move to make such a claim, right? He has been, we'll get into this later too, he has been stripped of his CEO role because of impulsive tweet. You know, the SEC went after him because he's trying to get approval on Twitter.
And I do think, what I will say though, is there does start to be a mix in my mind between, you were saying he doesn't wake up thinking, how am I going to, I don't think it is the twirling of the hands and the mustachio and stuff like that. But I do think there is an active mindset at this point that he's developed over many years, which is he doesn't care, like, distorting the truth to him doesn't seem difficult, and it becomes easier and easier. So when he says something like this,
I'll agree with that. Yeah.
Then all the benefit of the doubt goes out the window when you realize that this becomes a pattern to influence the stock, right? Because then the people that just are casually observing this, they're like, "What? Oh my gosh! Tesla goes up. Tesla goes up. Tesla goes up."
Right.
And yeah. So then I think what might have started as like optimism, like unrealistic optimism, starts becoming a weapon.
Yeah. And when you're getting a monetary incentive and an emotional incentive, it's potentially hard to resist. The thing that I didn't realize is the machine gun nature of his tweets. You know, you see this one tweet, you're just like, what? But when you look at he's just saying random shit all day long.
You'd have to be Trump to compete with that.
He's retweeting like all day long.
Yeah.
And when you look at individual retweets or individual tweets, you're just like, huh? But when you look at the entirety, it's still, huh? But you're like, well, he's talking about, 99% of his tweets are benign. Yeah. They're just like regular tweets from someone in his position. And a lot of the tweets are actually things that I could absolutely get behind, which we'll get to later when we talk about the Thailand kids thing. But because he has no filter and he has only one avenue, I think, for interaction, he has no ability, like for me, I'll just say that, I'm online and I'm on social media. And if I'm going back and forth and something bad happens and I'm bothered by something and I'm maybe angry and I'm about to comment, well, I can go talk to my wife. I can talk to you.
Yeah.
I can go to a therapist. I have emotional awareness.
Yeah,
I am bothered by it, as has been discussed ad nauseum on this podcast.
But you have recourses.
But I have other avenues. I don't have all my eggs in that basket.
Right.
If you have all your eggs in that basket, you're like gravitationally or atomically bonded to Twitter in such a way that whatever's happening inside of you is going to come out.
Yeah.
I'm not justifying it at all. I'm just trying to figure out how to conceptualize this because up until this point, as I said, you could argue everything he was doing, and certainly you would have impulses to like clap back at someone, a journalist here or whatever, but he wasn't doing that because he was focused on business. But once he gets the dopamine drip that is Twitter, and finally a venue for daily joking reaction conversations and feeling like you're a part of a crew, that's what the 4chan and the Pepe and the Harambe and all that bullshit, it's all just signaling to each other, we're part of an in-group. We're part of a crew. We understand each other's lingo. Other people don't get us.
Yeah.
They think, our jokes are too edgy, or they don't even understand our jokes.
Right.
Isn't that funny? We are friends. And, there's a lot of other dudes in basements with no friends. They're all, and, God bless, right? They're getting that. But if that's your only venue, then you're going to shoot yourself in the foot.
And when you start mixing that in with the way to try to get approval, in addition to the jokes and the memes, is to drop like crazy. The most generous way to say is overtly optimistic. The potentially more realistic way to say is like lies about your company.
Right. But imagine like you're a 13-year-old and you're online.
Yeah.
Maybe you make a claim like, well, if I wanted to get my dad's sports car and drive over to your house, I could do that.
I could totally do it.
And the other guy online's like, no, you couldn't.
Right.
You could see that 13-year-old going, yes, I could. And maybe even
trying to steal the car
and drive over there just because he's immature, he's insecure, and he's desperate for one avenue of approval, and he has no other way of, because he's 13. That's what it looks like to me.
Yeah. And he might say, like, my dad's got a Ferrari, even though it's not.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's take a break. The rest of this episode will just be for patrons of the podcast. And if you want to hear it, become a patron. Click below the link. Otherwise, please take care of yourself because
you deserve it.